Hello and welcome back to On the Workbench. Today we're going to be doing the 2016 Power Tool Awards. This is inspired by several online tool awards as we get into the fall season. Looking forward to Christmas and the other holidays and gift-giving time. You can expect a variety of blogs and magazines to be giving out the tool awards. Some of them more dubious than others, and I've always had my doubts about the dubious categories and highlights, so I thought I'd do my own take on it and have some fun and do a little bit of a parody with the other tool awards. So these are honest tool awards, not sponsored, just my opinion. I hope you found this enjoyable and a little bit fun, and have a good laugh. So in our first category, we have the most innovative tool concept. Seriously here, we've got the DeWalt FlexVolt 60 volt and 20 volt technology. I think you've got to at least appreciate the innovative technology here of switching between series and parallel battery configurations. And so I've got to tip my hat to the Stanley Black & Decker company and DeWalt for bringing that to market. It's a fascinating technology, and it'll be fascinating to see where that goes. On our next category, the tool that was almost there, but still managed to miss the mark. And we're going to be sticking with the FlexVolt for the winner of this category. And our proud recipient here is the FlexVolt table saw that comes in with an 8¼ inch blade, because everyone carries 8¼ inch blades around them rather handily, right? When all of our table saw blades are 10 inches, or miter saw blades are 10 inches or 12 inches. If you could have just went with a 10-inch blade, doubled up and made it a 120 volt saw, like you did with the miter saw, and since DeWalt even came out with a 120 volt power adapter, it would have been the perfect way to actually make the table saw much more marketable. However, I'm concerned DeWalt probably had some reservations about cutting into their market share of their other table saws. So they just stuck with 60 volts. And an 8¼ inch blade? Come on. Next category, the most obscure tool line. I think we got tip our hat again to DeWalt and the FlexVolt line for this as the ALLIGATOR saw. Not released in North America, therefore not covered by most American tool bloggers, is the ALLIGATOR saw used for cutting large panel insulation in Europe. And this is marketed as a 54 volt tool because in Europe you cannot call anything 60 volt max because that's really just kind of quasi-marketing speak for 54 volts, because the 64 volts at startup, but the actual voltage is really 54. Next up in our category, the most anticipated tool launch. And I'm actually, this is one that interests me, and that's the outdoor power equipment from Milwaukee coming in 2017. At least to me, I think if Milwaukee can do this right, they just might switch me over. I'm kind of considered a free agent right now in the tool market. At least in the 18 volt category. And if they do this right with the string trimmer, the hedge trimmer, the blower, and even better if they could come up with just a universal power head where I could use my other existing universal attachments, that'd be fantastic. So far they haven't announced anything about a chainsaw, which I think would be an excellent addition to complete their outdoor power equipment offerings coming up in spring of 17. Our next category, the most money spent on attorneys. You get a tie between the BOSCH team and the REAXX table saw and the SAWSTOP company. It's been fascinating watching the litigation between these two companies unfold over the last few years over flush detection technology and how it's getting done, what's patentable, what's not, and I'm glad to see that SAWSTOP actually has a competitor in the marketplace. It's a fascinating way that the way that BOSCH has actually really kind of flipped the tables on SAWSTOP, where the blade is reusable and all you have to do is replace a cartridge. And if my understanding is right, there's not even a different cartridge required for a dado blade. And so I think if this comes off right, once the lawyer bills get paid, maybe we'll see a few more saws come to market, and that'll drive down the price. But right now, the big barrier is simply price. DeWalt has a similar competitive offering, but all theirs is just a guard detect that warns you that the guard's in place. But BOSCH and SAWSTOP certainly have invested their monies in attorneys. And as an observer, it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds and where the patent law ends up. But I tip my hat to both companies for at least trying to push the envelope regarding personal worker safety. Our next category, the most underpromoted 18 volt tool. And I think I've got to tip my hat to Makita on this one for their LXT lineup. It's been out for quite a while. It's got one of the largest ranges of tools. And in almost every category, even things like concrete pencil vibrators, metal nibblers, vacuums, radios, right angle tools, all sorts of tools in all sorts of categories. Milwaukee's coming close in this. Notably to me, they've got their chainsaw, they've got outdoor power equipment, which has been out for a while, as well as a cordless biscuit joiner. However, currently their lineup is lacking in the nailer category. There is a stapler, which I think also does brad nails. But Makita, as a brand, it seems like does not send out a lot of free tools to the various popular tool bloggers, most of whom receive their tools for free in exchange for their reviews. Now, whether those reviews are biased or not is a whole topic for another discussion, but Makita, I don't believe, engages in that practice, and therefore your major tool bloggers don't cover their tools that frequently. Now, for the next category of the most obvious Me Too product, is the oil impulse driver. Makita led the way on this, and then fairly quickly after, Tektronix Industries, the parent company or the OEM for RIDGID, RYOBI, and Milwaukee, quickly came out with a RIDGID competitor, and now there's a RYOBI competitor for the oil impulse market. I'm not convinced the market demand is that strong for it, but I obviously could be wrong, and it's fascinating to see RIDGID follow Makita's lead on this, and we'll see where this goes going down the road in the next couple months to see if this would actually might lead over into spillover categories of an impulse wrench. Our next category, the most useful product that's actually not yet made, and that would be a 4-cycle chainsaw. I've been fascinated with the idea of having a 4-cycle chainsaw. In my garage, I don't like having my oil and fuel pre-mix. I like being able to have straight gas that I can either put in my mower, my pressure washer, my weed eater, or even straight into my car to use up a tank that's about to expire. And so buying or investing in a chainsaw that runs on a pre-mixed fuel, requires a separate fuel storage container that I wouldn't use that much throughout the year. That'd be worth investing in. But if I could use a 4-cycle engine, I'd probably actually consider buying a chainsaw. Yeah, it would probably weigh a little more. My hack right now is I've got a pole saw that's on my 4-cycle string trimmer, and that does just some small work. But a full-size, 16-inch, 18-inch bar with a 4-cycle engine, I think is most likely doable. Yeah, it'd be heavier, but I'd like to see that brought to market. Our next category, brands sharing a parent company. Most obvious. In this case, it's Tektronix Industries, and you can see this with the RYOBI and the RIDGID Impact Wrench. You can see this with a handful of other tools that have come out either in RIDGID branding, then RYOBI branding, or RYOBI branding, then RIDGID branding. I know all the companies claim that the different brand units work independently, that RYOBI and RIDGID, if you look at some of their products side by side, actually stand out remarkably well for being remarkably similar design, and I don't think that's any coincidence. And they're also both sold exclusively at the Home Depot. Our next category, brand with the most confusing product line. Now I've got to tip my hat to Porter Cable on this one. They've got a circular saw, they've got a reciprocating saw, they've got a drill, they've got an impact driver, that all have these various cheaper alternatives. And if you look at their website, they're not very clear on listing the specs for every tool or having different tools available in different combo kit arrangements, where you've got value tools mixed in with premium tools and combo kits. There's also a USB power source that's only available via Amazon.com. It's not available in stores. And just their market positioning seems kind of confusing. And most peculiar to me is the placement of, or the availability of a battery status indicator is only on their premium drill and impact, but none of their other tools actually have that feature. You can see the red arrow on the screen on the premium brush drill. They've got an upcoming launch of brushless drill and impact drivers. In all fairness, I'm probably a little biased with Porter Cable. I'm currently invested in their 18-volt line, and it really frustrates me to no end seeing how they've switched to the 20-volt max just to stay with the Stanley Black & Decker 20-volt max nomenclature, and abandoned their 18-volt line. They had just about every tool except for an impact wrench. Our next category is the most overlooked tool launch, with actually little chance to. And here we're going to go with KOBALT's 24-volt brushless lineup. The KOBALT line of tools has sold very limited, and it's exclusively at Lowe's. My big gripe with the KOBALT 24-volt lineup is that just simply the lack of available add-on tools. If you're going to invest in a battery platform, you're going to want to be able to expand with other tools without having to have additional chargers to go with specialty tools. And in this case here, I think the 24-volt concept of adding the extra cell to the battery may actually pay some long-term dividends. But if they can't launch enough extra tools to be able to bring to market a full lineup, I think unfortunately the 24-volt lineup will be doomed in the same place as the KOBALT 20-volt lineup and the KOBALT 18-volt lineups, which were very silently switched out between them a couple years ago. Our next category is the most overlooked patriotic tool moment of the year. In this case here, this goes to the Craftsman Industrial brand, as the Sears Craftsman brand is looking to bring back at least some hand tool manufacturing back to the U.S. in the area of ratchets, wrenches, and sockets. We've seen a few of these begin to show up in some stores nationwide, and hopefully that rollout will continue across the board. For a long time, Craftsman was the first name most people thought of with American-made tools, but in recent years, most of their tools manufacturing has unfortunately moved to China. Now, in all fairness to Craftsman, I can't necessarily blame it all on them, because some of their manufacturing partners that were domestic in order to compete likely moved themselves and caused Craftsman to have to shift their manufacturing overseas. Which brings us to the least competitive 18-volt tool lineup. And I'm going to go with the Craftsman C3 lineup here. That, unfortunately, over the years, it's basically a knockoff version of the RYOBI 1 Plus system. If you look at just the design of the batteries, it's almost a perfect copycat design of it. In 2016, saw the discontinuation of the outdoor power equipment, which was frustrating for a lot of users that were invested in it or had thought that they could expand into it. Luckily, I was not one of them. They've also discontinued a number of tools, and as you watch new RYOBI 1 Plus tools come to market, it'd be hard not to sit around, if you're a Craftsman C3 owner, to wonder why you're being left out and left behind on keeping up with your tools. Not to mention the proprietary nature of the C3 battery, exclusive to that. Now, if you can make it interchangeable with the RYOBI batteries, that would be great, as well as with the obvious questions about Sears and the Craftsman brand viability into the future. Makes this maybe one of the least viable 18-volt lines in the moment. On the other end of things, the most complete, least discussed 18-volt goes to the MASTERFORCE line of tools sold exclusively at MENARD'S. Now, all these tools here are manufactured, to the best of my knowledge, by a manufacturer I'll mention later. Most of your major bloggers don't seem to cover a lot of the MASTERFORCE tools. I actually don't own any myself. It's not because I'm biased against them, but I just simply don't have any of my investments in them. But they actually have a remarkably complete range. Notably, they did discontinue their hedge trimmer and string trimmer for 2016. But they've got grinders, they've even got a bandsaw, they've got light circular saws, brushless tools, and so forth. But for some reason, they consistently get left out of the popular tool discussion. For whatever reason, I think a lot of that's due to the regional nature of the Menards chain of stores. Next up is our most promising 12-volt tool. And here I tip my hat to Makita once again. Milwaukee's been a staunch stalwart in the 12-volt category, seemingly just as the king of the category, having demolished almost other tool brands' entry into the 12-volt area. We saw DeWalt come out with a couple 12-volt tools, and they've stopped in the last couple years. But in the last year, Makita's brought to market better than a half dozen 12-volt tools with all with brushless motors, and I'll be excited to see what Makita can go, where they will go with this line, just in terms of making the technology smaller and what they can do with it. They've got a tile saw, was one of their more recent additions, and my hope is that they'll bring more tools to market with some 4 amp hour batteries coming soon, and we'll see where that goes, because I think that could be a great entry-level tool brand. That would be great for most homeowners starting out, and it would actually have all the power they would ever need by a reputable brand that you'd expect to last into the future. Next up is the most desired but currently non-existent. In this case here, this is the cordless roofing nailer. There's been a lot of talk with various players, whether it's Porter Cable, DeWalt, Milwaukee, RYOBI, all coming out with cordless nailers. There's even a cordless finish nailer. There's cordless framing nailers. But the most obvious category to me would be a cordless roofing nailer, because if you're a roofer and you're up on the roof and you've got your nailer and you got your hose lines, you got your noisy compressors, that limits your communication. If you could simply have a battery operated nailer, I think that would actually not only improve workplace productivity, I have to wonder how much safety would be improved by that as well. And so I really think that would be the most obvious, like, next tool to market if I was behind marketing nailers. Now is our most pointless tool range expansion. And this goes to ESTWING, expanding from their basic hammers, which ESTWING has been known for a long, long time, and driving nails, into bringing out pneumatic tools. As battery technology gets better, it's hard not to look on the long term and just wonder how much longer life will there be for the pneumatic tool market. So I'm not sure I understand the logic on ESTWING's expansion into it, and hence why I've labeled them as one of the most pointless expansions. In none of their tools have I seen anything that's dramatically changes anything, pushes the envelope, or makes any sort of substantial improvement on the existing marketplace for pneumatic tools, or specifically pneumatic nailers and staplers. Now is the category and the winner for the most overly wordy basic tool. This has to go to the Roll Air Air Keg, which has a very wordy description, and let's just break it down and be very simple, folks. It's an air tank. Or if you want to get fancy, it's a 10-gallon air tank. That's all we need to say. It's nothing difficult to describe. And for what it is, I mean, yeah, it's got some nice features with the legs at the bottom, but a 10-gallon air tank doesn't need to cost over $100. But I guess if you value the Roll Air green, so be it. You can pay $100 and some for it to be able to have matching green compressor tanks and tools. Now for the most actually innovative tool of the year, and I'm going to call this a tie. That on one hand we got the Milwaukee 18-volt transfer pump, which to me the reason why this makes the list is this is an obvious candidate that someone could easily keep in their basement if they were concerned about a sump pump failure. That's a whole area that this could potentially branch into as an extra backup in the event of a power failure. You'd have this to bail yourself out. Or alternatively, if you need to move water, you're changing a water heater, just a whole brand new category of tools that Milwaukee opens up with the transfer pump. One thing I should note here on the transfer pump is this is not for flammable liquids such as gasoline or oil. And the other winner on this is the DeWalt 20-volt portable power station, where it takes a combination of 4 20-volt or the 60-volt max batteries to output 120 volts. And this is DeWalt's somewhat half-witted answer for why their table saw is not 120-volt compatible, is because you could plug this in and make any of their corded tools cordless, which is true, but still not an excuse for them missing the bus on the table saw. But I like this because you could actually use this as well to be able to provide backup power for a sump pump or anything else that would go out in the event of a power outage at your home, assuming that your power tool batteries are already charged. So I think both of these are novel ways to be able to address some new situations that are actually legitimate progressions in the tool world. Next up is the power tool line most deserving of being discontinued. And I think there's a clear-cut winner in this one. This is the Craftsman Nextec line. It's just sad and pathetic to see what's happened to this line of tools that once had a lot more tools in the aisle than what they currently have. Now they're down to essentially a drill, an impact driver, any remaining tools that you can find floating around. And they came out with a heated jacket and a heated hoodie last year. Not convinced if those will be back for 2016 or not. But the list of discontinued tools is just long and is a testament to the slow death march of the Nextec platform. The first things to go, the outdoor power tool launches of the 12-volt hedge trimmer, the 12-volt string trimmer, or what they had with the little flails on it, as well as the vacuum, the inflator, the power source, the trim saw, the hammerhead nailer, the right angle impact, the oscillating multi-tool, and you can see on the line there that it's just been a slow, dreadful march, and I think it's time that Sears just puts it to bed and kills off the Craftsman Nextec line. Next, we have the hand tool line most deserving of being discontinued. In this case here, I'm going to choose KOBALT for that dubious honor. That it seems like when you shop around at Lowe's, you'll see hand tools come to market under the KOBALT line, and then they quickly get discontinued or they get remanufactured. They've got no commitment to maintaining current product design into the future. You'll see things go from being a Tool Source brand to being a KOBALT brand to being Discontinued, changing colors, color schemes. Their toolbox lineup seems to always be changing, and there just doesn't seem to be a strong commitment to maintaining the brand and what tools are associated with the brand. And so when I think of KOBALT, all I think of is Lowe's, and they've got some sockets, but what type of sockets they have, whether they're universal sockets or chrome sockets, it just seems to be an ever-changing landscape of what KOBALT is actually manufacturing, or really, let's be fair, what tools Lowe's is having manufactured with the KOBALT name slapped on it by other tool OEMs. And so our final category today will be the most powerful, least visible tool OEM or ODM manufacturer. And this goes to Shurvan, which is a Chinese-based manufacturer that secretly makes products. So I guess I shouldn't say secretly because it's somewhat of an open secret if you do your research. Products that are labeled as Craftsman, KOBALT, RIDGID, Husky, MASTERFORCE, and then their own in-house brands of Ego, Hammerhead, and perhaps there's even more tools that they produce in their factories. And as a result, they actually are able to drive the bus quite a bit on tool development and tool progression, but they also hide pretty secretly in the background. You know, the other runner, if I had to declare a runner-up for this, it'd be Stanley Black & Decker. That's behind DeWalt, Porter Cable, the Black & Decker line, also Stanley hand tools, BOSCH, pneumatic tools, but also BOSCH has sockets now, and virtually copycat products from Porter Cable and jigsaws and certain power tools. And it's interesting, even the BOSCH line of a drill and impact driver, it's actually oddly enough called an 18-volt lineup when everything else under the Stanley Black & Decker lineup is marketed as 20-volt max. And so you got distinct brands that show up at different stores in different combinations, but are still controlled by Stanley Black & Decker as the parent company. But I think Shurvan, because they're far less widely known and hold all their profits overseas, is certainly the winner of this dubious honor. So I want to thank you today for watching these Power Tool Awards brought to you by On the Workbench. Once again, these are not sponsored. I hope you enjoy this humorous slant on power tools for the year, and have a great day. Bye.